So the EP is a manifestation of a more or less complex mental system that essentially involves traumatic memories. And that's the theory. Like, is he going to prove any of this? That's a hypothesis, rather. It's not a proven theory. When traumatized individuals remain as EP, these memories are autonoetic for the EP, but not for the AMP. What? What does autonoetic mean? Relating to or characterized by the capacity to be aware of one's own existence as an entity in time. Among the capacities thought to be uniquely human are autonoetic consciousness. Right. So for the ANP, for your ANPs, because you may have many ANPs and many EPs, but your ANPs don't have memories that are aware of their own existence and as an entity. What the fuck is it on a... What? Memories can represent pathogenic kernel... But why does he put pathogenic in brackets? Memories can represent kernel aspects of the memory, but pathogenic kernel aspects of the memory. And references himself. A complete overwhelming event or series of such events, and are usually associated with a different image of the body and a rudimentary or more evolved separate sense of self. Thus, the EP range informs from re-experiencing unintegrated aspects of trauma, from reintegrating unintegrated trauma in cases of acute and post-traumatic stress disorder to traumatized dissociative parts of the personality and dissociative identity disorder. Huh? Again, I feel like I am not... Like, I know I call myself an idiot all the time. But when it comes to reading English, that's something I read English good. I do words good. And I have large vocabulary, okay? And I've said this before. If I struggle to read a sentence, it either means that the sentence is... it just means it's not good English. If I am struggling to read a sentence, it is not good English. I know that much. You've seen me do that fucking English language impossible poem. I find that easier to read than this nonsense. Thus, the EP range informs from re-experiencing unintegrated aspects of trauma in cases of acute and post-traumatic stress disorder to traumatized dissociative parts of the personality in DID. I am an ape scratching my head in confusion right now. I'm not... What... It is important to note that traumatic memories manifested in the emotional part are very different from processed narratives of trauma. And this is why I was saying, Clary, those references are bollocks. Because then he goes and references all these references, 89, 1904, 1919, 1928, and then Kolk and Van der Hart, 1991. Yeah, all the references are bollocks. His reference for what he's just said there. Don't forget, it's important to note, don't forget, you plebeians, that traumatic memories manifested in the emotional part are very different from processed narratives of trauma. That is fact, because look at all these references I can cite. From ancient history and my own fucking shit-filled mouth. What? Oh, a bit of bricklayers. Don't forget, folks. We all know that Janae back in 1889 said it, so it must be true. If it was said in 1889, it must, like, and then it was reinforced in the 30s and the 40s, you know, and then it does kind of look like, you know, 1904, 1919, 1925, 1928, and then it looks like there was a bit of a gap from 1928 to this Wankstein came along. he's sort of saying it's on a spectrum, but not really, because he's still being dumb about it. Fucking no, this is literally so painfully dumb it hurts. He's actually referencing Janae, 1889, 1904, 1919, 25, 1928. He's referencing Janae's 30-year career 100 damn years ago. It's important to note, traumatic memories manifested in the EP are very different from process narrative of trauma. Proven science. I don't know what that means either, which doesn't help, but here we go. Just trying to see what it was that I could see behind my head. It's my bong every now and then. The other bong. Right. Normal memories convey a narrative to the listener. Stories told and retold, changeable over time, and adapted to an audience. While narrative memories are verbal, time-condensed, social and reconstructive in nature, traumatic memories are often experienced as if the once overwhelming event were happening here and now. These hallucinatory, solitary and involuntary experiences consist of visual images, sensations and motor actions which engross the entire perceptual field. They can. That's at the very extreme end of like a full-blown psychotic level flashback. They're rarely hallucinatory, mate, but okay. They're at least objectively characterized by a sense of timelessness and immutability. Yeah, I'd say they're characterized by depersonalization and derealization. But yeah, flashbacks don't generally involve hallucinations. That's what I'm saying. Like, the most severe psychotic, I'm not even saying, like, I have dissociative flashbacks. You know, I have flashbacks that might not last long. You can have flashbacks when you sleep. I certainly think emotional flashbacks are a thing, but I don't think it means CPTSD. I just think it means PTSD. Because again, what if you have, I can't remember what it's called right now, but the type of brain that is not visual in the slightest, that doesn't remember things in a visual manner. Sup, Hangry, welcome back. I know people who take hallucinogenics and never seen anything. They can't think visually remotely. It's all sound and words to them. I have a mate really want to get to chat more. I'm just going to call him out now whilst he's not here. Cheddar, who you've spoken to. Cheddar is the friend I've spoken about who doesn't have an inner monologue and like only gets inner monologue when they're extremely anxious and overwhelmed and stressed, and otherwise is literally free of thought. They live in the moment. It's unbelievable, and I'm always jealous of it. So that's why I don't think CPTSD compared to PTSD is valid in the slightest, because the distinction is emotional flashback versus regular flashback, but the distinction there is visual versus no visual. If you're just receiving emotions and potentially auditory hallucinations, then you'll get CPTSD, but why should that be treated differently to PTSD when it could be PTSD, but you just don't have a visual memory? Not everyone has visual memories, and science understands this now, and that's why I hate this sort of black and white thinking that this sort of shitty text espouses, because they're looking at ancient shit from the past instead of looking at modern day ways of thinking. I'm stood up because my legs hurt. And then I opened the window and I almost knocked my Muller corner out the window, but it's okay. I keep things next to the window because it keeps them nice and freezing cold. It's great. Ooh. Yeah, I like stretching my legs about still. Inner monologue. No, Himira. No, right, so there we go. Himira is somebody who doesn't have a natural constant inner monologue, obviously, if you think that way. If you have to activate your inner monologue, you're like my mate Josh. Where, no, for me, I literally, life is like Peep Show or Scrubs. You know, in Scrubs or Peep Show, you know, there are comedies where character will start talking and the other character starts thinking stuff. That is life. I'm always pre-scripting what I'm about to say. My brain is always working a few seconds ahead of me in real time, and I'm always in a monologue. Go, 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 go. The problem is I used to have more intrusive thoughts, more negative intrusive thoughts combined with the inner monologue, that made the inner monologue just a continuous die, kill yourself, Pete, sort of thing. Why don't you kill yourself? That was awful. Whereas now my inner monologue is just kind of calm, but just always a second or so ahead of me. Aphantasia. If you have aphantasia, yeah, my mate has aphantasia. And if you have aphantasia, the mate who also doesn't have inner monologue, there we go. No, it can apply to... and thus you, if you were to experience extreme trauma, Himera, and end up with PTSD, would probably not have visual flashbacks if that's the way you've lived your whole life. You wouldn't just suddenly start having a brain that now can see in pictures. That's not what would happen. But then, and if you don't have overly visual dreams at night, visual flashback memory nightmares, if you're just waking up in a cold sweat with the feelings and just getting emotional flashbacks, you would get CPTSD as the diagnosis, because you cannot get PTSD according to current English literature on the subject and current DSM literature. So DSM and ICD literature would both say you have CPTSD, cannot be PTSD, and I say bollocks to that. I literally say it's gatekeeping. Really fucked. Oh, catch you later, Cryptid. Miss you saying goodbye. Have a nap. We all have a good one. You have a good one too. Mate, thought broadcasting delusions and psychosis, genuine psychosis, that I was convinced everyone could read my thoughts for and it would come and go in times of my life, and I had no idea how connected that was to my bipolar, because my God, that's not something I've experienced whilst on quetiapine. I don't ever get that worry that my thoughts are being read by everyone around me and that everyone is in on this secret that I'm not in on anymore. That fucking feeling of literally being Truman in the Truman Show, or being dead and in this dream where everyone else knows about it but me, it doesn't happen anymore. So my God, I understand this schizophrenia, paranoia. It's not schizophrenia, paranoia of the psychosis of thought broadcasting solutions. God almighty. EMDR is so fucking stupid. Yeah, whereas I just have like the overpeat that I chat to sometimes in my brain. Like I do talk to myself in my head. I've always called him the overpeat. My brother does the same, calls it Jab. Sup, Lex? CPTSD is a form of PTSD, technically, yes, but it's gatekept. It's literally like we were discussing this the other day, where like if you have CPTSD, well, that was from like repeated mild trauma. You didn't go to war or anything. It's not real PTSD. It's CPTSD. It's lesser. It's complex. You know what I mean? Doesn't help. Doesn't help. Bipolar 1, bipolar 2, bipolar 3, you don't get treated any differently depending what you say to somebody you've got. If it was PTSD 1 and 2, nothing would change about how people are treated. They'd be helped better. CPTSD it's unhelpful as diagnosis. It's also steeped in Christian sexism and shit. What up, PTSD gang? It's literally thank you, Lex, and it is literally thanks to this man here that I came to this discussion originally on aphantasia and my current decision on literally, because Lex has diagnosis of I think technically CPTSD, right? But it's bullshit, because if you don't see things visually, you can't get the PTSD diagnosis. And I literally say fuck off to that. I just say fuck off to that way of thinking. It's anti-science, that way of thinking. It sticks to, it's that old binary way of thinking. It is not congruent with our current way of understanding things remotely. Yeah, talking to myself when I'm depressed. But these days I'm better at it. I'm able to tell myself to shut up so much better these days. The power of medication. Yeah. Oh, but Angie, you know, DID is actually the worst, most stigmatized illness. At least you don't have, like, you know, at least you weren't abused by a satanic ritual cult. Wait a minute. Christianity was there for you instead, wasn't it? Dark jokes. Sorry, I don't know if you've seen it, but Chloe once spoke about how, you know, cancer is bad and all, but DID is worse than cancer. Because, you know, cancer can be cured. So can DID really, but, you know, whatever. Why have you not got the new fancy badges? You just have to equip them. I don't know how to switch your badges about, but you should have fancy badges. You should definitely have fancy badges. DID is a thing, but as I say, it is definitely like PTSD 3. There's going to be PTSD 1, 2, and 3, like bipolar 1, 2, and 3. And that was what will get people real treatment. Yeah, fuck Chloe for that. You can literally go to therapy. Yeah, you can get chemo, but still doesn't mean it won't kill you. Fuck's sake. Ugh. Fuck Chloe. I remember that. Super dark jokes. Right. So. Alright. They're at least subjectively characterized by a sense of timelessness and immutability. And they have no social function. Yeah, flashbacks and dissociation and PTSD have no social function. How do you have no badges? I'll make you mod later, alright? It's effort. No, like, this keeps happening to people where they should have badges and they don't. I swear this happened to Clary as well. It literally makes no sense. Maybe if you, like, unequip one of your badges, one will pop up. I don't know. I don't know how to do it, though. Anyway. So, although the EP's traumatic memories include reproductive elements, they are not exact replications of overwhelming events. Apart from the individual's experience of the event, they may include his or her fantasy and misperceptions at the time, and exclude parts of the experience. This is sort of in line with what I've been saying about what I think about DID as well in some ways. It's just, I disagree with the initial statement that everyone starts all fragmented and stuff. That's something I would never agree with. And then he references something from 1889, so I'm not interested in that. Also, elements of other traumatic experiences may become associated with traumatic memory. Literally, then he goes, for example, the traumatic memory of Charcot's patient Lelog included the idea that he had been run over by a wagon. Charcot. 1889. 1889, motherfucker. Why is he actually... This is an actual... This isn't the introduction anymore. This is him explaining the theory, and he's using, for example... In 1889, this probable rapist, sexist creep who worked for the Catholic Church in France. Like, what are we doing? Why is this a thing? How is this a thing? How is this a fucking thing? Oh, good luck, Angie. How is this... How... Advert. Hey, guys. I've just hit the ad button. That was a mistake, so I'll wait for the 30-second advert to be over before I say my spiel. How is this a thing? What the fuck? I actually... Members of the scientific and academic community that watch and enjoy me for some reason. Next time you write a paper, or actually just next time you're like emailing a lecture or something, can you just like send them this and be like, hey, can you just like just spend 10 minutes just joke marking like the introduction and some other bits of it for me? I'd really appreciate it. I'd just love to know what you as a professor actually think of this kind of writing in like this being a published, supposedly peer-reviewed paper from 2010. But the person who wrote it like got this barred in a one-of-a-kind case. Yeah, they did. They did work with them. This is what I'm saying. Psychology, that's what I used to say, Lex. Psychology used to be psychology used to be philosophy of the mind, but it is evolving. It is different. I think 2010 was about the changeover, but like, how is this still being referenced and used by people? And in fact, before losing consciousness, he had seen the wheels approaching him, which impressed upon him the idea of being run over, though he was actually never hit. Also, wow, it's like he's using a trauma. He's using a car. Imagine just instead referencing somebody from like 2008 who has PTSD because of a car crash. He could have done that, you know, in this paper from 2007, but instead, 1889 motherfuckers got to, because he faps to people like Pierre Genet and this Charcot person. Fuck me. And also elements of other traumatic experiences may become associated with the traumatic memory and thus confound it. Another distinctive feature of traumatic memories is that upon their reactivation, access to many other memories is more or less obstructed. Thus, when the emotional part is activated, the patient in that state tends to lose access to a range of memories that are readily available for the actually normal part. The lost memories typically involve episodes. No, that's not what's commonly found with traumatic memories and their reactivation. What? No, this is literally specific to cases such as DID, and it's kind of the thing that makes it separate and different to things like the PTSD that people in military engagements or refugee camps seem to suffer. PTSD like my own. We don't forget the traumatic events ever. It's just we never realise they're traumatic. Normally, we just compromise and accept them as jokes and lightheartedness. You know, just boys being boys when other boys like, you know, put fingers in your arsehole and their penises in your mouth. It's just boys being boys. That couldn't possibly leave you with any trauma, even though you know it would. You know, if a group of 10 boys were to do that to a girl the same age as them, but when it's 10 boys doing that to a boy the same age as them, that's just boys being boys. You know, it's me passing that off as not being traumatic. Never forgot it. Just didn't accept it as trauma until last year. You know, that's how this shit works for PTSD. You remember it all in vivid detail. Now, what's up, Sterling? You don't have to follow the rules if you own the journal. Yeah, the journal has since shut down. You know, like, whereas amnesia is real, then this is why I am fine with saying things like, you know, DID is a thing and all of that. Like, catch it in a bit, Pangray. Enjoy your drama. Because there are people who have total fucking dissociative amnesia. Exactly. I know there are people where you do not remember. You just have blank spots. I have blank spots, you know, from things like drinking. Everyone's experienced amnesia at some point in their life is the point. Can you not have PTSD and amnesia about the traumatic event? Yeah. So you take like, yeah, an event could be traumatic to others but not traumatize you. It could be considered a traumatic event but not actually traumatize you, leave you with PTSD, and you could still have amnesia or not amnesia about it. Like, the brain forgets stuff, it clings onto some things, and sometimes the issue is with what is called CPTSD, or DID or BPD. The problem is the brain clings onto emotions or feelings or sensations from the moment rather than specific visual memories or auditory memories that enable you to remember it in clear detail. So that's what happens, it would seem, with DID. Your brain clings onto emotions felt, or the you know, I'm going to say some really dark stuff here, trigger warning, but like, you know, you're a kid, you're getting assaulted or something by somebody, you imagine you're a superhero from the book you were reading recently, you know? And then years later, you have forgotten the traumatic event, but you have these emotional flashbacks, PTSD flashbacks, where instead you remember wanting to be that kid and that being that kid and feeling awful and wanting to be that hero or whatever, you know, like, I get, that makes sense. And we'd call that PTSD. We would. Like, that should be regarded as PTSD. I find it being a separate type of PTSD due to the implicit nature of there being such intense amnesia and dissociation. But God, I hate saying this because I know it's going to make people unsub and hate me, but I know in 20 or 30 years, people are already, like, DID is trying to be debunked. I'm trying to reinforce it or evolve it, but people are trying to just disprove it all the day at time anyway. Things like the memory wars are much bigger than people realize. The DSM and ICD won't continue to have it in their episodes, in their revisions. It's not going to be in the DSM-6. Like, so if you guys want help going forwards, we need to evolve it, and the reality is evolving it into PTSD2 is going to be the least stigmatizing, most helpful thing. You know, people doing more research onto the theory of maladaptive daydreaming to take, because that's actually more just a hypothesis than anything, but to take the hypothesis of maladaptive daydreaming and turn that into realistic theory, that's what we need. And then to understand how that complies and combines with things like amnesia and PTSD, and then we've got PTSD, PTSD3, you know, PTSD2. Yeah, exactly. You're not saying DID doesn't exist either, I know. It's not. And the term DID, I'm afraid now, will forever be attached, forever, to things like satanic panic and I think things like endogen. Like, I'm telling you now, ain't no endogenic system, that's the point, they don't have trauma, is going to be claiming to have post-traumatic stress disorder too, right? They wouldn't claim that, would they? You know why they wouldn't claim that? Because they're not claiming to have trauma. So we need to aim for PTSD2, which is and then we can let people not understand it, and we can let the doctors and us understand it to get the help, like exists with things like schizophrenia and bipolar. I don't care that the majority of, you know, it pisses me off when people are like, oh, they're acting so bipolar. Oh, don't be so bipolar. Yeah, it pisses me off. But it doesn't affect my treatment from medical professionals now that I have my diagnosis. Yeah, it annoys me when people downplay PTSD or think you can only get PTSD from being in the army. But now I have my diagnosis of PTSD, it doesn't affect my treatment from professionals. Okay? So let people think whatever the fuck they want to think about DID, MPD, or anything. You get your diagnosis of, we evolve it, we get something like PTSD2 out there. You get your real treatment, you can be fine. Finally. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. That's my current hope or goal, I guess. Yeah. I also wouldn't say an extreme version of other trauma disorders. I'd say a different version of trauma disorder. Like, it's PTSD, but slightly different. PTSD plus a lot more amnesia or whatever. You'd say the social stigma around schizophrenia does affect your treatment on an individual personal basis. Fair enough. Yeah. But if you were to go private, you know, and talk to psychiatrists that specialize in schizophrenia, it's not going to affect your treatment from them having schizophrenia. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas currently, if you go private with DID and seek specialist treatment from a DID specialist, you'll end up dosed up on 1,000 milligrams quetiapine, having an exorcism performed on you in a 20-year relationship, getting your wrists broken. I'll say schizophrenia and bipolar. Bipolar has a slight edge in that bipolar became sexy. Bipolar did become sexy a few years ago. People like Stephen Fry and then other shit made bipolar like the sexy disease, where, you know what I get when I tell people that I have bipolar, right? Genuinely, right? They'll be like, oh, does that mean you're like really creative and a bit like, do you have a high IQ? People like instantly assume that means high IQ, super creative, but a mess. And I'm like, well, actually I fucked my IQ, so it's not that high anymore. And I'm lazy. I am a lazy mess. That part's true, but it's just, there's plenty of people with bipolar who aren't that way just because famous people like Kanye have it. Yeah, he's creative. Yeah, he's a mess. But so it's got, I have reverse stigma. I have a very sexy disorder, to be honest, with bipolar. It's sexy. People think we're dangerous and sexy and cool. And it did go through a long phase of people faking it. There was a phase, I'd say, sort of around 2006, 2008, 2010, where you would have had Tumblr and things been bigger. I think people would have been faking that in a big way, but I got lucky, you know. And I know I'm saying sexy stigma is still a problem, but it's not quite as bad as just like the worst stigma. Like, I will also have people just assuming straight up that must mean I have a criminal record or I've been to jail and stuff as well. Or that, like, you know, if you have bipolar, you can never be a dad. Like, I've heard that one said by people. Should never be a dad, things like that. Like, that's an unconscious inherent bias that I've held on for a few years and I'm trying to let go of, because I always wanted to be a dad, and then for the last few years I've said no, I don't, because I have bipolar and I'd never be able to be a good dad. And then I'm like, no, I just need to get better so I can have the things I want, you know. So yeah, it's sexy. But DID became way sexier, quite clearly at some point. I mean, normally if people ask me what I have, I was like, I'm fucked. Just not even, I'm fucked. You should use that too. Not even mentally fucked, you're just fucked. Gonna sit again for a bit. Okay. Yeah. Van Gogh is not great because he was ill. It was in spite. Maybe someday. Like a great daddy. That's what you think. Let's keep the kink out of this for a moment. Yeah, I do have internalized ableism. Is what I realised recently. The amount I kept saying to myself, no, I can never be a dad because of my bipolar. And it's like, I just always put it on that, it's my bipolar, so I'll never be able to be a good dad, because there will always be those moments where I change and I won't be there. And it's like, yeah, but actually, if I had a good partner and everything else in life was stable and good, that wouldn't actually be that much of a problem. Like, maybe. We'll know as I grow. Right. He only painted Starry Night whilst he was actually receiving mental health treatment. But it's his sunflowers and self-portrait after he cut off his ear that everyone loves too, don't forget. And and most of his artwork was destroyed by his family and other things. Anyway, so where were we? Another distinctive feature of traumatic memories is that upon reactivation, access to many other memories is more or less obstructed. Thus, when the emotional part is activated, the patient in that state tends to lose access to a range of memories that are readily available for the actually normal part. All right, so it's saying that when you switch personalities or switch parts, you lose the memories that are attached to each part. And that is what, we're saying would be sort of the case with the idea, but not even the case, because that's why so many of you get upset, because you're like, I thought like I meant to have like these trauma holder parts, and I thought I meant to have these parts that remember everything, but even they don't remember it or whatever. And it's like, maybe saying something is meant to work away when a certain way, when it's all hypothetical pseudoscience, isn't the right way to think about this stuff. Being like, I need my brain to work this way, I want it to work this way, I need, it should work this way. Why doesn't it work this way for my brain? What's wrong with me? Am I the person that's wrong? Do I not have DID because my brain doesn't work this way like the others do? I hate it. This is why I hate, again, the CPTSD thing versus PTSD, because some brains work differently. Doesn't mean you don't have the same fucking disorder just because your brain works slightly differently. And saying it must be this and it must be that for things like this is bullshit, when even things like bipolar and schizophrenia have huge checklists and you have to fulfill certain things on them, and nobody's bipolar is the same as anybody else's bipolar. Nobody's schizophrenia is the same as anybody else's schizophrenia. Everyone's mental health issue is slightly different to everyone else's mental health issue. How can they not understand that? What is with this specificity? Clicks. Put a pizza in front of someone and everyone will have a different reaction. Yup. How in the world would everyone react to this the exact same to trauma? Right? Yet we expect them to fit into these neat, specific categories, and it's like, nah, this is why I hate DID as a diagnosis, because of its forced specificity that causes all this angst and anxiety of, do I have DID? Is this my diagnosis? Is this the right diagnosis for me or not? And it doesn't happen with something like PTSD, because it's accepted that there's various types and it can affect you in various ways, blah, 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 blah. So basically, once your psychiatrist says to you, no, it's PTSD, you're like, okay, it's PTSD. Right. Okay, I get it. And a good psychiatrist will explain it to you in a way, and you'll be like, okay, I totally get it now. Literally no two schizophrenics, no two bipolars, no two ADHDs. That's why there's so many different medications for all these illnesses in the first place. And there is no current specified medication for DID, yet they imply all this specificity. If it was such a specific thing, where it affected everyone in such a specifically recognizable way as Van der Hart loves to imply, then there would be a medication for it by now, that would just work on everyone who uses it. But there isn't, and there can't be, and there isn't for PTSD, there isn't for bipolar, there isn't for ADHD, there isn't for any fucking mental illness. So the assumption that this has to work differently to every other mental illness in that regards is just the arrogance and ego of the authors. And the fact that it resonates with the people who read it is why it's gone on. Whoa, I didn't realize. There we go. Just getting the thigh view. There you go. Again, you are right, Lex. This does have far more in common. This is what I used to say. This is philosophy of the mind. This has far more in common with how a philosophy paper would be written. This is how you would write a philosophy paper with references all throughout history, because it's fine in a philosophy paper. But it makes no sense in a medical text, I feel. Again, I speak without backing or credentials to say that, so. When I go back home, I'm asking my next door neighbours, the doctors, to read this for me and give me their opinions on it. They're medical doctors, but they can still have an opinion on a paper like this. In this paper, we have presented a theory that attempts to comprehend trauma-related structural dissociation of the personality. In this context, the term dissociation has been qualified in several ways. See, they qualify the term dissociation here. As a process, dissociation has been described as a failure to synthesize and personify terrifying experiences. I disagree. This is where I disagree, right? I don't think dissociation is to do with trauma. I do think I don't think you can be healthy and non-traumatized and have PTSD or DID or anything like that. But can you be healthy and non-traumatized and dissociate? 100%. 100%. Depersonalization and derealization as by themselves are medical fucking conditions. This fucking egotistical prick. Good luck, Twilight. In the acute phase, this failure manifests in psychoform and somatoform peritraumatic dissociative symptoms. And again, the second they start talking about somatoform dissociation, it's Pierre Genéan psychotherapy, pseudo-psychology nonsense that doesn't connect to the modern world of psychiatry and psychology. That much is for sure. Anyway, good luck, Twilight, yeah. Also, wait, guys. Wait, what? The theory holds that dissociative processes do not split the emotional system that constitutes the pre-morbid personality in random ways, but rather along metaphoric minute cracks that What is this flowery, not medical language doing here? Why is he still... he's literally saying, but rather along metaphoric minute cracks that naturally exist between action. But what process are you describing here in the brain? This is insane. This is insane. But rather along metaphoric minute cracks that naturally exist between action systems and subsystems. These systems are conceptualized, right? Metaphor, conceptualize as evolutionary-based action systems that serve major functions, predominantly survival of the individual in the face of major threat, survival of the species, and management of daily life. Is this... Oh... Oh, the survival of the species bit just hit me. What makes DID different to PTSD? PTSD, you have the need to survive, you have the survival of self, and then you have the normal part. DID plus, you have the 3. What's the survival of the species, the need to procreate? What's he saying to have DID means? You can't have DID unless you... Let's break down the language of what he's saying. I want one of you to say it before I do. What's he suggesting there? Man, you used to be able to say shit as long as you're a white dude and you could just publish and everyone had to take you seriously. Facts, yeah. Having DID means you have a normal part, doesn't hold emotion, but can do daily life. You have emotional parts that hold trauma, and then you have parts required that exist for the survival of the species. Not just the survival of self, but the survival of species. Did means you got to be horny. You got to have a horny alter. You got to have the wanna fuck alter. They're all in it for the make baby. Always comes back at some point to make baby stay in kitchen. I swear to God. So these systems are conceptualized as evolutionary based action systems that serve. They are based. They're fucking. You know, they got one thing right. These are motherfucking based action systems. Fucking predominantly survival of the individual in the major threat and survival of the species. That is a fucking based action system. In this context, we have proposed 3 levels of structural dissociation that mark a range of trauma-related disorder. Here we go. So it's like PTSD was well known at this point, but they're like, right, we're saying what it actually is. It's in this context we proposed 3 levels. So there's simple PTSD, complex PTSD, DES and DDNOS, and DID. I mean, that's definitely 5. Proposed 3 levels of structural dissociation: simple PTSD, complex PTSD, DES and DDNOS, and DID. I need another bong. I can't. This is so dumb. I just... Right, systems in chat. We've done this before. You know the rules. When scientists inform us that all people with the ID have the sexy, horny, wanna fuck alter, and we always learn about like having positive and triggers and shit stuff, right? You know, so it's sexy alters in chat time. And you know I'm joking. But yeah, sexy alters in chat time. Fucking kill me. Again, I see this as the same as PTSD. And if somebody were like, the assault you had when you were younger in that manner, assaults that you had in that manner, means you have that, you know, I'm gay, you know, the gay part of me, I'm gay. You know, I'm bisexual. The reason I want to suck dudes' dicks is obviously because, you know, there's that part of me that it's because of the trauma. I hate this logic. I literally want to burn and destroy this fucking logic. It needs to be destroyed. Siamese counterpart, little old soul. God, fuck off. I need to eat. Sexiest of alters, Lex. Very much. Right. This is killing me. So there's 5 things that he just listed, but he thinks it's 3. I'm in a bong. Let's continue reading this fucking piece of shit. We're in the conclusion. We can do this, Pete. We can do this. I've skipped 14 pages. I've skipped 14 pages, but it's all right. We can do this. No, I think we only skipped 13 pages, actually. It's all fucking nonsense anyway. Oopsie. I can't stop stressing the gap in nonsense anymore. Right. In this context, we have proposed 3 levels of structural dissociation that mark a range of trauma-related disorders: simple PTSD, complex PTSD, DES, DDNOS, and DID. Even combining DES and DDNOS, that's still 4. This is such insanity. According to the theory, these various disorders can be situated on a continuum of complexity of structural dissociation of the personality. Yes, he's trauma gatekeeping. I told you, this is trauma gatekeeping. I have food up here. I just need to eat it. Being lazy. And I have food downstairs. I just need to microwave it, and it'll only take a minute. That'll happen once we're finished with this. The food is coming up in a sec. I thought I Hate You Don't Leave Me had erased any like brain cell that could be focused on this thing. It's this sort of thing left, but I'm like so broken by the dude. We're there. I'm breaking it in the conclusion. I promise. I'm not an idiot. I'm doing it. Right. So, according to theory, these various disorders can be situated on a continuum of complexity of structural dissociation of the personality. Within this perspective, DID is not a manifestation of suggestion and role playing, as some authors believe. No, fine. But an extreme on a dimension. It's the most extreme disorder, baby! On a dimension of trauma-related mental disorders. However, the theory also holds that secondary elaboration and shaping of previously evoked dissociative mental systems may occur by a range of psychological, social, and cultural influences. Culturally plural, baby! We've presented a body of empirical and experimental data that support, or the least consistent with the proposed theory. They haven't presented any data. They've presented... You can't call writings from the 1800s data, can you? That surely is just hearsay or anecdote. That can't be called data. And they're like, that support it, or are we at least consistent with it? This is breaking me. You weren't here for I Hate You Don't Leave Me. No, I Hate You Don't Leave Me is the name of a book, Lepadia. It's the name of a book. I don't think you were here for it either. It's glorious. It's so bad. Medical sexism, but also the BPD Bible. The BPD Bible. I found out about it through X having been recommended it, subs having been recommended it, subs having been played it in the car, subs having been bought it, subs' parents having been bought it. The amount of you motherfuckers that had been suggested that motherfucking book. Because basically, if a therapist, psychotherapist, counsellor, if any of them have heard of BPD and are interested in BPD, they've read that book and they've formed their opinions about it from that book. And that is, it explains a lot of the problems and toxicity and issues with that diagnosis and why I think it's complete shit. Benefit of the doubt. Humira, I will trust whatever you tell me tomorrow after your train ride. Right. A minimum, it can be said that the basic distinction between AMP and EP serves heuristic functions in the study of trauma-related mental disorders. I don't know what that means. Stop using words I don't know. Enabling someone to discover or learn something for themselves. So the distinction between AMP and ENP serves serves the purpose of self-discovery in the study of trauma-related mental disorders. What? For example, the theory predicts... So he's saying it's worth following up on. I disagree. That's why it was abandoned for like 70 years. For example, the theory predicts testable... But also we saw when the data was from. Do you remember? We were looking at all the references. All the data is like, if this study was reviewed in 2010... That means the data at latest should come from 2000. The oldest the data can be is 2000 to be used in a medical thing of any kind, I'd have thought. Why did that play the wrong subscribe thing? Also, hello, Holly. With an IE. Why did that not play the subscribe thing, though? It did the wrong thing for subscription. Never take your own life. I should have done that. Never take your own life. Why didn't it do that? Rude. Fucking rude. think that amount of citations is I'm so sad Trip isn't here to see my beautiful animation of their hamster in a tank. I was inspired by it when I saw it. I loved it. I'm 99% sure 10 years is the limit for it being like acceptable in certain manners. You can use past 10 years, but that's for creating a picture. You can't use it as data, I don't think. I really don't think, or else there wouldn't be the need to do new PTSD studies and things. But we constantly do this stuff over and over. I don't know. For example, the theory predicts testable neuroendocrine differences between both psychobiological systems, such as more prominent norepinephrine levels in emotional parts. Norepinephrine or adrenaline. Well, yeah, when you're emotional, he's talking about adrenaline. No, your neuroendocrine cyst, that's your adrenal. When you're emotional, he's saying your emotional parts and your AMPs are studily different because you can see different amounts of adrenaline in the person. Ergo, when you're upset or emotional, you might have adrenaline in you compared to when you're calm. Oh my fuck. Compared to AMPs upon exposure to perceived threats. When you're emotional, you'll have more adrenaline when you perceive threat than when you're not emotional. Another example of the heuristic function of the theory relates to the differential responses of AMPs and EPs to trauma memories and masked angry facial expressions, as well as their different cortisol levels. Findings suggest that processing of perceived threat by these dissociative parts of the personality diverges from very early stages of information processing onward. This hypothesis can be tested using functional MRI. In fact, we currently plan this study. Never happened though, did it? This theory also suggests a host of treatment guidelines that cannot be elaborated here. See Steele, Vanderhart, and Nienhuis in press. Briefly, it indicates that treatment of trauma-related disorders, including DID, involves integration of feared mental contents in ways that are adapted to the current integrative capacity of the patient. The treatment basically concerns resolution of the structural dissociation of the personality by exposing the dissociative parts of the personality and their mental contents to each other in carefully planned steps that promote integration and preclude redissociation. The theory predicts that overcoming tertiary dissociation in DID is less demanding than overcoming secondary dissociation. It also states that overcoming primary dissociation implies exposure to severe perceived threat and thus requires the highest level of mental functioning. In practical terms, the theory suggests that treatment is phase-orientated. In the first phase, level of functioning of actually normal parts is raised by gradually overcoming phobia of mental contents, your irrational fear of your mental contents. What if it's not an irrational fear? I don't know. Phobia of actually normal parts for each other, and phobia of emotional parts. Also, phobia of attachment is addressed in at least a working alliance and cooperation between actually normal parts and EPs among each other, and with a therapist secured. So it's all about getting your parts to talk to each other, I see. Right. If and only if the integrative level has been sufficiently raised, you got to level them up. You got to level up your fucking Pokemon. Once they've got a high enough integrative level, phobia of traumatic memories can be addressed. But only once they've hit like level 10. If they're still like level 7 or 8, don't be hitting them with the fucking traumatic memories, all right? The phobia of traumatic memories, yeah? In the second treatment phase, be stepwise exposure and prevention of redissociation. Be careful with your leveling up. And in the third and final phase, integration of the personality, overcoming phobia of intimate attachment, and coping with life in a non-dissociative and otherwise non-avoidant ways are the main goals. Oh, right. So this literally goes against my belief on holistic treatment, where you should. I agree with like it being phasic or graded in a sense, therapy in this manner, but I think you should be trying to treat them all sort of simultaneously as well. What's the point in only trying to help your patient live a non-dissociative and otherwise non-avoidant life after the rest has been achieved? I think I know where he went wrong. He wasn't interested in teaching Hilly how to get over attachment, her phobia of attachment, and how to live a non-avoidant and non-dissociative life. He wasn't helping Hilly with the important parts because all he wanted to focus on was phase 1, which is phobia of her. So basically, phase 1 of treatment for Onno van der Hart, what he described here in the structural dissociation, phase 1 is you need to discover all the parts and get all the parts talking. Phase 2 is then get them over their now absurd level of attachment to their therapist they've probably developed because you've given them a whole load of iatrogenic alters. And then phase 3 is finally helping them live a normal life. What a load of bollocks. Also constantly calling them all phobias. Sup, Nor? Yeah. I have sadly no gym badges. Irrational phobia. It's a rational phobia. Those bad memories might be incredibly upsetting, meaning there is a real reason to have fears and worries over certain memories, but it's rational despite them actually affecting you in a real way. Because phobia, remember, means irrational fear. There are no rational phobias, is the point. There's no such thing as a rational phobia, because phobia, that word, derived from phobos, it means irrationality. The Greek god, I believe, phobos, who was some kind of god of madness or something. We have rational fear, and we have phobias. We don't need the word irrational and irrational as the point. Phobia and fear literally sum up those two terms without the need for rational and irrational. Irrational and rational are literally just extras that actually confuse, because then people will say rational phobias, irrational fears, when we should just say, because that's now wrong, because you just have fears and phobias. Thus, it's a rational fear. Very severe phobia of rubber spiders and fish in tanks, and a very mild phobia of water in video games. It wigs you out a bit. It makes you a bit, and it is completely irrational, that, because there's no way video game water when I'm playing a video game can possibly hurt you. That is irrational. Like, but memories can. If you are, the thing is, if you are suffering from PTSD and thus your memories can cause panic attacks, dissociation, switching, self-harm, trauma, it's not a phobia because you have a rational fear of your memories at that point, because you fear that unlocking that floodgate, rationally you fear it, can cause you to self-trigger. You know? I don't have a phobia of a certain band and a certain songs out there. I have a very real, rational fear of them, because I cannot listen to, I'm not saying what it is, but there's something out there that I cannot listen to without instantly starting to dissociate and then have a full-blown flashback. Uncontrollable flashback. I wouldn't call that a phobia like this cunt is. So as always, just through examining a bit of language and how poorly something is written, we can debunk this. And I am inviting all of you to go further than I have today and go further through the text, read the bits we skipped today, inform us in Discord of what we missed, and we will talk about it tomorrow. But I don't think it matters too much, and I think you all agree. Because when the abstract, when the conclusion, when all the parts we have read are so inept, it's disgusting. Yeah, music is for so many people. Music and smells. Music and smells. The one fear, the one again, it's not. I don't think it's a phobia. I currently have a bit of a fear of going to the toilet for number two. I developed some PTSD whilst looking after my granddad. Some extra PTSD on top of the PTSD I already had. And the smell of my own poop now causes me to start having flashbacks, and then vomit, and break out and sweat, and fit, and just anxiety, and it's horrible. I wouldn't call myself. I wouldn't say I have a phobia of going to the toilet. Like, this has developed rapidly over the last year. It's good old PTSD, and that causing me to have a genuine anxiety and fear of having a panic attack every day. Starting off the day with a bit of a flashback. It's great fun, you know. I smoke so much fucking cannabis at the start of the day. Oh, you're from Wales, so you come from like the land of abusive shitbag bands that are universally loved. Standing on the rooftops, everybody scream your fucking pedo heart out. Lost Prophets? Pedos, right? But he's in jail or something, so it can't be him, at least, but great fun. What a load of bollocks that this has been. Yeah, I agree. I see you guys agree. It's fear. It's not phobia. It's shit. And it's one of my only PTSD triggers that I'm willing to share on this channel because none of you can trigger it. How are any of you meant to cause me to smell my own feces? You can't. You can't do that to me. I'm safe from being triggered by other people in general. Public spaces, it's happened a few times because certain other people, obviously, they may fart or whatever in a smell that's kind of similar. But yeah, it's just, without being TMI, the smell of my shit is identical to the smell of my granddad's shit. Okay, and so once that smell hits my nose, then my brain goes to where my brain's going right now, but in a far more emotional, visual, and well, it starts to make me feel a bit queasy. But there were a few times where I had to physically pull feces out of his butt, where he had no strength to squeeze and wasn't really aware of what was going on because of how bad his Alzheimer's was. And he had major, huge, bloody hemorrhoids, and it was disgusting and horrific and traumatic. And that's why me and my dad would have to take it in turns doing it, basically. Neither of us could do it each day, so we'd literally swap shifts on the toilet duty because it was the nurse. We had to get a nurse to help out with it during the days, but again, they weren't there for the evenings. Swear to God, he waited for the nurse to go, and then it would be one of our turns, you know. And, oh, catfish in the bottle, man. Angie, you and Clary there share some musical trauma hate, I feel. Different bands and stuff, but would you say Lapedia? Is that a challenge? Bro, black humor's fine. But yeah. So, you know, I this isn't about PTSD ultimately, this article, this document, it is about DID. I may not, in some people's, I may just be, why do all these singletons keep talking about something that doesn't have anything to do with them? Right. You know, people say you're a singleton, why are you talking on this, blah, 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 on Twitter. And it's because, guys, this does also have to do with things like PTSD and stuff, and the language. You with DID may not find it distasteful, disgusting, abhorrent, but many of us with the complementary or similar disorders that is brought up in here, you know, they say there's the three things that are then five things, you know. So there is this comparison, and thus me with my diagnosis of PTSD feel I do have a right to talk about DID. I do. My argument is these fucks are screwing it up for you with all this fucking pseudoscience that is so abhorrent and obvious, and somehow still has sexist rhetoric in it by saying DID, PTSD is ANPEP, but DID is ANPEP and sexy time alter. And so there's always the misogynistic layer too, and it's the least scientific, worst written thing I've ever seen. And this man abused his patient for 20 years to write this. This is the fucking theory that he came up with. That's the conclusion and abstract, remember? He came up with in 2010, when in the years of 1985 to 2015, he was abusing Hilly, making her worse, and writing this theory. So if you follow this theory and his advice on how to get better, I would conclude you are likely to get much worse and waste your life. What a disgusting scunt, cumbag, fuck, gremlin shit. Done. Now we still need to read. Catch you later, Mira. We are going to read some of The Haunted Self next, I feel. But you know, it's amazing when somebody's been legally cancelled, disbarred, but still best-selling author. That's literally amazing in medical fields. Like that Andrew Wakefield comparison just gets more and more relevant, you know. And again, Hamira, thank you for your help with this stuff and acquiring some of this info and things. And I know that was more the other one, but I just can't stop saying how much I appreciate that. I am somebody who will show my thanks unabashedly. What am I looking for? Looking for a thing, guys. What am I looking for?